It's scary and devastating. We never want to leave and go anywhere during the summertime when it's monsoon season or when there's any kind of rainstorms coming, because we don't know what's going to happen.
I had a lady one time call me, and she thought what she had on her property was a big wash, and when I explained to her that it was a fissure, she basically broke out in tears.
When it rains, I hold my breath driving through it, trying, because it'll open up and swallow an entire car right there.
Yeah, well, we're here in southern Pinal County between the West Silver Bell Mountains and the Sawtooth Mountains off to the west. And there's this large earth fissure that formed in the past year and a half, and that's directly behind me. This fissure is about 1.8 miles long, nearly 2 miles long, and in places it's as much as 15 to 25, almost 30 feet deep, and 10 to 15 feet across. Other places it's much smaller than that. We know that it's only developed since March of 2014. Yeah, fissures are the result really of groundwater pumping. We've been growing crops in the Sonoran Desert now for over 100 years, and for most of that time it required extensive groundwater pumping out of the aquifer below us. And as that happens, as you remove water from there, you replace it with air, and the sediments in the basin slowly begin to get closer and closer together, and the basin floor will subside.
Most of our drinking water comes from groundwater, and so that causes land subsidence, which is lowering of the ground surface. And then around the edges of these subsidence bowls, you're going to get fissures occurring, and so you have fissures all over the county, which again are a result of groundwater withdrawal, and the fissures are exacerbated by surface runoff. When the runoff comes, it'll hit the fissure, which sometimes are perpendicular to the flow path, and that infiltration will erode the sides of the fissure, causing it to cave in and grow.
When the fissure flows, which is right here, it goes across the street, down, it floods everything. And there's literally no way off the property.
But when it rains and floods like that to where we can't get out this way, you have to have a four-wheel drive to get out that way. Our neighbors here in front, luckily, allow us to stay on this side and drive up on top of their property and cross over on the other side of the fissure.
It's an issue out here. The fact I can't get off the property during a flood is an issue. We had the monsoon season, and that was something that I questioned was, how do we get out, if an emergency happens, and there's nothing that we can do.
It's best really to avoid fissures because we don't want to send more water to fissures than already gets there. That's where the challenge is how do we get the runoff through the area without sending it through the fissures. When you have areas just riddled with fissures, it becomes a challenge.
Right now the main issue is flood control. The flood control and the permits for building, those people have allowed an entire street of houses to go up over property that should have been flat open land for the water to flow evenly and at a lower height, so it would disperse evenly over the land. They've built rows of houses back behind us, so now all of the water funnels down their man-made road right into our backyard. It's dropped the property value down to nothing. We were told when we first looked at the property that it was a sinkhole that's been there since the early 1950s and had never moved. The realtor that owned the land and sold the land filled it in, and it's opened a couple of times.
I was informed that by the owners that you could always get on and off the property. They had a little car and such, and that was not true.
I think we rely a lot heavily on the real estate industry. I believe there might even be a state law about disclosures with regards to fissures.
The county certainly really feels for these people that they were given or bought a piece of property that does have a fissure on it. I mean, there's really nothing we can do about it, except, we encourage people to learn more about their property. When you're going to spend a lot of money on an investment like that, it seems that you would want to know everything about that. And if they weren't informed by the realtor or the person who sold them the property, I'm certain that they may have some kind of legal recourse possibly if they knew about it beforehand.
The county doesn't want to listen. They are pencil pushers. They push us from one person to the next. I said, how can you possibly have granted building permits over property that you knew had a fissure on it that would cause issues like this? And they just push us off. We talked with the county assessor. We went to meetings back when this was, a big thing. And now everybody's just kind of trying to brush it underneath the table. But every single time it rains, we hold our breath and wonder, where's it going to open up? Because it runs the whole entire length of our property. Everybody's just turning a blind eye. Nobody wants to hear about it. We're just one family, and they just really don't care.
So, the county certainly feels for them, and we wish we could do more than that, but when it comes down to it, if we fix a fissure for one person on their property, and that's using public dollars to fix it for one person. If it was an issue that would affect a ton of people, if we could fix one fissure that would help a lot of people, that would be a little different in that realm. But when it comes down to spending public dollars just for one person, you do it for one person, they're going to want it for another person, they'll want it for another person, and unfortunately it's not really lawful to do that.
I've called everybody. We've called the county, we've called the engineers, we've called geologists. And the geologist came out and looked at it and says, well, we just mark it on our paper that this opened up. I said, well, what do I do? He says, there's not much you can do. Okay, well, I'm responsible if somebody gets hurt because it's on my property. So everybody out here has all said the same thing, you fill it in. So it gets filled in with rock, dirt, whatever. Fill in that hole because, if somebody were to drive their car into it, I am responsible because it is on my property.
We call the company The Wall that digs basements, and they come and drop off loads and loads of dirt. My husband has vowed, though, the next time that it opens, he's not going to fill it back in. He's just going to try to contour it and make it like a big ditch.
These fissures can sometimes go down hundreds of feet, and just simply filling in with more dirt, it's just kind of like putting a Band-Aid on the problem. I don't know that it really makes it worse, but it's really a temporary fix.
And what's scary is that we don't ever know if we had 80 feet of ground underneath us or 2 feet. Because that fissure does open and it does flow because the water has to go somewhere. The way that they've diverted water brings it right here where the fissures are.
Potentially is and I've seen this done before, is build a mound of dirt over it, and then when the runoff comes, instead of being able to go into the fissure, it'll just go around it. That may help. That may help slow the growth of the fissure, slow down any manifestations of open cracks and problems.
I've contacted the county. The county says, oh no, that's not our responsibility. And I've actually said, then tell me why there's county street limit signs on Happy Road. And my response, the response was, what? There is? Well, I'm gonna have to check into that. Haven't heard anything.
If it's a piece of private property, it hasn't been the county's problem. If it's a piece of private property, it's not our issue at that point, because again, it would be spending public dollars for one private property owner. It comes down to the person who's actually, when they buy the property, they have to do their due diligence to understand what is on their property.
Well, that's really the big challenge, is we don't really know how to mitigate fissures. The geologists I've spoke with, they all say the best way to mitigate is to avoid. If you know a fissure exists, don't build near it. And they're even hesitant to tell me how far away to build from it, because where one fissure exists, you could have another one open up right next to it. There's still a whole lot of information out there that's yet to be discovered. It's something that the state is consistently and constantly working on. New fissures open up all the time.
We need the help of city and county authorities. We need the help of people who live in rural areas where lots of agriculture is going on, where lots of groundwater overdrafts are happening, to tell us if they see new earth fissures developing. We're happy to come out and check them out. We want to add them to our database and make sure that everybody understands where they're at and a little bit more about how they form and why we're so concerned about them.
I'd like to see the county come out and do something with Happy Road and this issue so that we don't flood.